Oh, sorry for my late review on this lens. Better late than never, right? Also, too, save the best for last, because I do not trust anybody else's lens reviews. Also, too, I don't have affiliate links. I'm not selling anything to anybody, except for leather goods, but that requires a lot of manual labor. So, here it is. Here's the 80mm f1.7, and by the way, here's my 110mm. Yes? See the size difference? Yeah. Both heavy lenses, not that I care, I love heavy cameras and heavy lenses, but medium format is always big and heavy. So let's go over the differences between the two. Let's go over the superficial obviousness. On the 110mm, of course, f2, we're looking at $2,800 and $2,300 on the 80mm f1.7. Talk about this lens in relationship to the 63mm here just in a second, but this is a 63mm field of view equivalent, whereas the 63mm GF lens, of course, is a 50mm equivalent. I sold off my 63mm GF lens for a good reason. I'd like to talk about that shortly here in a second. And we're looking at a $500 difference between these two. However, when the 110mm goes on sale, it's essentially the same price. Now, I posted image samples, boring image demonstration samples on Facebook and Instagram, and those links are below. 12-element lens on the 80mm. Honestly, you know, if I didn't have either one of the lens, I might myself wait for the 110mm to go on sale, since you could get it for the same price as this 80mm f1.7. It's usually $500 or $600 on sale when the 110 does go on sale. It is a short and close portrait lens. It has one minor issue, and thankfully that's not its image output or how it actually renders, which is absolutely off the hook incredible. So I can actually say, let's talk about the positives first, and we'll talk about the negatives on the 80mm. This is easily the best short portrait lens that I've ever used in my entire life. By short, I mean 60mm and less, easily. There's something that comes close, but it's nowhere near as sharp as this 80mm, and that's the highly recommended by myself sold, not myself sold, but recommended, the Voigtlander 58mm f1.4 Nocturne. Of course, that's not a medium format lens, but trying to think of anything else in short portraiture that is so incredibly awesome as this lens is, and how it renders, and that's it. It does have some cat's eye bokeh, as you'll notice on the image samples on Instagram and Facebook below, whereas the autofocus elements and the bokeh on the 110mm f2 has less, significantly less cat's eye bokeh. Well, not significantly, but moderately less cat's eye bokeh. It renders more plainly and dully, not in a bad way, but there's this cotton candy ethereal bokeh rendering on this 80mm f1.7, which is reminiscent of some Voigtlanders and some of my favorite 58mm and 60mm lenses, so you can check that out for yourself. This lens is incredibly rare in that it has two characteristics which are not conjoined when it comes to ethereal cotton candy autofocus bokeh. And that is that it has that, plus the fact that it is just sharp as hell. This lens is just, whew, it is really, really, really damn sharp. Some of you only care about that. That's as unintelligent as someone stupidly buying a bottle of wine based upon how much alcohol content it has. There's nobody on earth that does that. Well, people just buy, how sharp is it? It's like, what about its other qualities? No, I just want to know how sharp it is. So for those of you that want to know about that, this lens is just insanely frigging sharp. In my highly educated and intelligent opinion, not an opinion, it's a fact, there's one design flaw in this lens. I'd like to leave that here to talk about immediately. But relational to the 63mm, which I did not like and I did sell off, I would actually want to call this the 63mm super improved edition. In other words, if you were even considering, and of course the 63mm is significantly cheaper, it's nowhere near as fast of a lens, but if you're considering the 63mm, forget about it. Like, get the 80. I know it costs more, but way, infinitely better has something a lot in common with the 63mm, and that is it's really bad, noisy, slow, jumpy, autofocus. It doesn't have a linear motor in it like the 110mm does, which is smooth and fluid and highly enjoyable. This has a herky-jerky, you know, epileptic autofocus experience, as bad as that of the 63. If you're familiar, it's bad. So it has a DC motor in it rather than a linear motor. I give it a 7 out of 10 for its design. It should have been made a lot fatter to accommodate for a linear motor. If they needed to charge more, which a linear motor does cost more, for production and insertion in a lens, they should have done that. They would have had to make the lens fatter, you know, to accommodate this slim design. People don't realize, like, why didn't they stick a linear motor in it? Well, it would have had to been longer and fatter, and they wanted to make it short and compact, which they did do. It's like, well, you got something that's optical perfection here, because I give this a 10 out of 10 optically. The bokeh is incredible. It has an incredibly rare quality that really, I can't think of another lens that, there might be one. Incredibly rare quality where it has ethereal cotton candy bokeh, and yet is also at the same time incredibly frigging sharp. So kudos on the optical perfection of this lens and the output of this lens. But this lens compared to the 110mm autofocus wise, in medium format's never been fast. And I don't care about that, but I don't love the herky-jerky DC motor. This is a constipated turtle compared to a jackrabbit on autofocus. Okay, let me repeat that if you need something to illuminate you more. Jackrabbit and the 80mm is a constipated turtle. It's not enjoyable. There's just no way in hell that aspect of it is enjoyable. However, for portraiture, who cares if it's slow? Even if it's slow, and I never cared about fast lights, if it's awesome, I don't care if it's slow. Don't give a darn. This is not a sports action wildlife camera. No way, lens, no way in hell. But it makes it unenjoyable on that aspect of every time you hit the autofocus on the half press and the shutter release. You know, you have to experience that, and it's undesirable, and it's not enjoyable, no way, no. I don't care who you are, it's not enjoyable. But optically, this lens is just the bee's knees, the cat's butt. It's a 10 out of 10 optically, and its output. Just really, I was actually quite stunned at how sharp and how beautiful this lens renders. And it's the autofocus elements, even though it has more cat's eye bokeh than the 110mm, the autofocus rendering on this is very dreamy, highly desirable, and like I said, incredibly rare that it's insanely sharp, and has that beautiful, very, very beautiful autofocus rendering. I don't think of any other things I would want to mention on this lens. Between the two, if they're both the same price, and they both are when the 110 is on sale, because the 110 autofocus rendering is incredible. The question is, what do you do? If you do portraiture basically only, then it's the 110. Especially the fact that the autofocus experience is so much better than on the 80. If you do kind of everything, including close-up, and you want a moderate field of view, and this is 63mm FX equivalent field of view, which 50 to 60mm really is moderate. Normal, they call it normal field of view. That's not true. A lot of people love to say that. And then the 80mm is more generally useful. Undeniably, this is more generally useful than the 110 is. It renders better to me than the 110, even though it has moderately more cat's eye bokeh. If I had my choice and price were no concern at all, I would actually pick the 80mm, despite its pinch you in the butt, undesirable, slower than a constipated turtle, noisy, herky-jerky, herky-jerky autofocus. But I know why they did that, to make this lens slim and small. They stuck in a DC motor rather than a linear one. That was a mistake on this lens. Should have made it fatter. Should have maybe charged another $100 more for it, maybe $200 to insert the linear motor into this 80mm. But it is what it is. At least I reported accurately, intelligently, and logically on the 80mm f1.7 Fujifilm GF lens. And I am the biggest GFX fanboy on planet Earth, and definitely so on YouTube. There's just no denying that. I don't care if you like me or you hate me. I don't care. I give accurate, logical, intelligent reviews, and I am an expert on lens reviews. Even if you don't agree, I don't care. It's still true. And this lens is amazing, but its autofocus is undesirable. But you kind of like, what would this lens be if it were a person? Like the beautiful Fran Drescher, right? It's like, wow. And then when you hear her talk, this lens renders so beautifully until you have to deal with its autofocus mechanism. Just jerky, slow, constipated turtle slow. But it is awesome. Its output is incredible. My God, it's sharp. My God, it renders well. This, like I said, the most important thing about this is easily the single best short focal portrait lens I've ever tested. It's right on par with the Voigtlander 58, but the Voigtlander 58 ain't nowhere near as sharp as this lens. But that's a 5-element lens, so Voigtlander 58mm f1.7 Nocturne. So highly recommend it, but I give you a fair warning about its autofocus. It will drive you nuts, and you will not like it. No way, no how will you like it. So at least I'm fair on the review of this lens. Lux e veritas. Thanks so much for watching, and wait for it. FUJIFILM.